I'm now 8 episodes through with Succession Season 1. In my prior video, after watching 2 episodes, the initial 2, I documented essentially my thoughts on the character name symbolism, why the characters had the names that they were given, how those might play out in the show, what the meaning of the names were, and how that was potentially going to flow into the storyline. And now that I'm through with 8 episodes, it seems that was pretty accurate. But instead of doing episode by episode breakdowns, I wanted to go over sort of the storyline and symbolism that goes on throughout the show, but more in an overarching sense, not every single thing, just a few scenes and how that plays into the storyline. So after episode 2, the Logan Roy, the father, starts to feel a lot better. He's not feeling great, but he's capable of being back in the office. He pees on his son's office floor, marking his territory, reminding him, I'm really in charge here. It's a very crude way to do it, but it's a literal pissing match or pissing contest, whatever term you want to use. And he's winning, and he does win overall, as far as I've seen. So Kendall thinks he's CEO. He's bringing money onto the board. He brings venture capital in, and the father says, "You're an absolute moron." He realizes he has to retake the reins because he's tough enough to deal with debtors and so forth, and he knows what he's doing. Whereas Kendall may understand the future of the business, but doesn't know the cagey aspects that you need, doesn't have those yet to actually operate and win, which the father certainly has. And so Kendall gets pissed off at all this and says, we need to take Dad out. His brain's not back yet. His father kicks him out at a charity event, essentially, of giving the title speech. And he himself gives it despite not feeling well. And he tells everyone, I'm back, I'm back, I'm back. And Kendall is just stunned. He's utterly emasculated, which the dad does to him constantly. It's no wonder he's got a drug issue and every other issue and family issues, because his dad, doesn't allow him to be a man. And as I said, Kendall sounds a bit like Kendall, and sort of like a pretty boy, doesn't really act like a man yet, and he's not so sure of who he is. So then Kendall reacts to this humiliation and starts to persuade people on the board and who have authority over those in the board, or a persuasive power over them, to plot a palace coup, essentially. So to take out Logan, and he convinces his brother Roman that the two of them are going to run the company, which they had started to try to do before the dad came back from his stroke or hemorrhage or whatever it was. And so they have a board meeting where he's going to announce a vote of no confidence, trying to shock his father. But true to form, he doesn't actually make it to the meeting in time. He calls in, he's late. He's like running through the tunnel. He's sweating. He's going crazy. And ultimately it's his brother, Roman, who was in agreement to sort of co-run the company, even though Kendall thought he'd run it and was just gassing his brother up. Meanwhile, his brother was gassing him up. And so the last person to vote, and Logan stays in the room. The chairman and CEO is in the room as a vote of no confidence is going on. So he's in full control. And he turns to Roman, who's the last to vote, and kind of has his hand up to vote no confidence. And his dad says, "All right, Romulus, it's on you." And it's interesting he says Romulus because Romulus and Remus were the mythical co-founders of Rome. And of course, Romulus killed Remus. And what happens here? Well, Roman ultimately sides with his dad, not just because he wants to screw Kendall, but really because, what's he going to do? Run the company and, really take his father out? It's easy to talk about it. It's not so easy to actually do it. That's really a different level. So ultimately, Logan wins not just the vote, but he also wins more power over the company because he finds out who on the board wasn't really on his side. Even though he doesn't realize some other people weren't so much on his side and ultimately caved on the vote, but he's able to just kick people off the board and retake more control than he probably had leading into it. So it's a huge win for him. Kendall gets fired along with a couple other people, 3 other people, and then starts to, just descend into losing his mind. He barely comes out of his home. He's got 5 o'clock shadow at all times, as I kind of do this morning. And he says he's getting into VC or whatever, but he just doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And what happens is Logan Roy wants to buy up a bunch of TV stations, and it's there's going to be some FCC dispute over it potentially. So he calls up the president and, more or less says, hey, can you get the FCC to not mess with me on this and allow this to happen? It sounds like the president's in approval of it, and he's back in full control. He's in command. He knows exactly what he's doing. And what happens is the optics of kicking his son off the board are damaging the company and damaging his power globally. Like, some crazies throw pee on him out when he's walking the streets of New York. There's all this stuff going on. So, he realizes they've got to do something, and they decide his oldest son has a ranch out in New Mexico. I believe it's New Mexico. It's the desert. The symbolism is that it's the desert. It could be anywhere. It doesn't matter where. But I think it's New Mexico. And so the plan is they're going to have a family therapy session, a literal therapy session. And they're going to also have a reporter there who's going to document, the family coming back together and patching things up. So at least for the cameras. And it's important that they go to the desert. Like, these guys are very wealthy. It's vastly more likely that a New York-based, extremely wealthy family would have coastal homes at Long Island, parts of New Jersey, perhaps Martha's Vineyard, somewhere like that. So it's very intentionally go to the desert. And if you look at biblical symbolism, for example, Christ goes out to fast and pray in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses comes from the desert to Mount Sinai and back down to receive the tables of law. And so, this sort of desert symbolism often comes with self-reflection and being alone in the desert, or being even with a group in the desert. There's nothing around, and you're really, I guess, just sort of in touch with things at a more spiritual level, because there's such little going on. And there's, at night in the desert, there's pure darkness. And you can find things in pure darkness. The darkness of sleep, the darkness, physical darkness, awakens the subconscious. And that's sort of what's going on. So it's like, you go to the desert, you find yourself, the family finds themselves, so to speak, is the goal. And then they come back to normal life with whatever they've discovered or developed there. It doesn't necessarily go that way for everyone, but what happens is, Kendall decides he's not going to come. The family's just fighting. Nothing really gets resolved. Shiv, the daughter, decides to go campaign with this sort of Bernie Sanders-esque politician, Gil something. And really, he wants to take on Logan Roy, this politician. He wants to regulate him. He wants to, really go after him. And she's siding with him. So it's like the most brazen attempt to get after your father that you possibly could make. And it's very public, and he makes it public too eventually. And then Kendall shows up in New Mexico, and you think he's going to go perhaps with the family. And he actually mentions the term fratricide when he's talking about going there, which is very interesting given the Romulus comment. And even though he would be the Remus, the killed one in that, and he is. But you have to die, in a sense, to be reborn, I guess, is what they're saying. And so he starts drinking again. He's been sober. He starts smoking crystal meth with, meth head guys in New Mexico. And he's got all this crazy stuff going on. He's drinking heavily. He shows up at the family. He almost gets in a physical fight with his father. He's then doing cocaine. He's doing all this stuff. And he's sort of, again, he wasn't whole before all this. Carl Jung said you can't be whole if you don't have a dark side. And so what he's doing here, out in the desert, out in this period of self-reflection, is getting deeply in touch with his dark side. And what happens is, as you go along, he comes back to New York. He's still doing drugs. He's like dressing younger to look like a hip VC guy. He's acting like a jackass, really. And then eventually he finds out that the VC firm or private equity, it doesn't matter to me, but whoever he brought on to help take over the company's debt, or help to pay that off and then give some board seats away, or at least one board seat away, through his friend. His friend is actually representing a rival media business owner. So it would be like almost like Rupert Murdoch ends up accidentally selling part of his board to Ted Turner back in the day when Turner was running CNN. So that seems to be like what the implication of it is. And Kendall gets an offer to have his shares bought out. So then these guys can take an even larger stake, and then he would have $500 million plus a stick in his knife in his dad's back to work with at his new VC firm, which would actually make him, have some substantial money to play around with. And so he starts to agree to do this. And towards the end of the 8th episode, when he goes in ostensibly to sign the papers to agree to this with his PE or VC friend and then this rival business owner, he rises up in an escalator and he's standing really stern, really strong, and he looks powerful. And it's this sort of rising up from the darkness, and now he's come into himself. He's gotten in touch with the darkness. He went to the desert. He went to this dark place, and now he's more whole of a man is the impression that they're giving. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, how this plays out. Will the daughter continue to defy the family? Will she screw over that politician? Again, her nickname is Shiv, so she's certainly capable of knifing people in the back, and she does it repeatedly. She cheats on her husband. She plays him, and he's so meek and mild, this guy Tom, who's a funny character, but he's so meek that she doesn't even respect him. She can only respect a guy who is as or more conniving than her. That's why she likes her political operative ex-boyfriend, who she's sort of going out with again, even though they're not calling it that. But it's going to be very interesting, and then we're going to see how Roman continues to work underneath his father. Will Kendall sort of try and steal him away to get back at his dad? How will he react to everything? And again, he likes plotting against people and palace intrigue, so he's going to be open ears to anyone who wants to take him on, and definitely will probably keep doing these. Not definitely, probably. I plan on keep doing these videos as I watch the show, and I hope you like them.